Each year, as part of the Centre for the Study of Rural Australia, which you don't know much about yet, but you will, Yasmin Chalmers, who's on our staff, brings international speakers over to broaden your experience here and to give you some insight into agriculture in other countries. So today it's great to have Trent Loos. Now he told me he's a sixth-generation rancher. I called him a farmer. He didn't hit me, but anyway, so from Nebraska. And he was one of the first in America to start actively advocating on behalf of agriculture, and has since been joined by thousands of others in the campaign to counter the spread of misinformation about farming. His passion for protecting agriculture was ignited when he attended a PETA conference in South Dakota a few years ago, at which a movie star told the 300 participants that ranchers should stop farming livestock. So we've got Trent with us for an hour, then we put him in a bus, take him to Melbourne, and there's 110 business people at a lunch to hear him. So without any further ado, welcome to Australia. Look forward to your presentation. Thanks, Trent.
I'm not texting as I do this. I have an idea. I've never tried it before. But is anybody here excited about the future of agriculture? How about give me a round of applause if you're happy about the future. If you're optimistic about the future of agriculture, I want to hear it. You know, if you're really excited about that, why don't you just stand up and show me how excited you are, like a standing ovation. Okay, I got the point. So now, Simon, I have a picture of Marcus Oldham College students giving me a standing ovation, and I'll be putting on Facebook that 100% of the students at the college liked what I had to say and gave me a standing ovation. There's a point behind that. And Simon mentioned the PETA and the animal liberation groups and animal rights groups that I deal with. And think about the images that they sneak into farms. They capture images and portray them to the public, and that the piggeries or the dairies or the egg-laying operations promote cruel and unusual treatment to animals. And think about how they can stage things to look however they want in conjunction with what I just staged and what I could post on Facebook and make it actually, who's going to doubt that you gave me a standing ovation? They can go to my Facebook page later today and see how excited you were. Now, a selective portrayal of the truth is that I misled you into why you're going to stand up. And later you'll be booing and, I'm told, throwing empty beer bottles at me. But that's irrelevant. I was able to present something to the public in the way that I wanted the public to perceive it. And that truly is a great challenge for us in food production today, in that we all have Facebook, we all have Twitter, we all have YouTube that we can access. And I just punched some button there that I don't really know what it is. And I'm being recorded too. That's not a neat deal. But we have instant communication. Is that a challenge for us or an opportunity? And I'm going to share this little story with you because I think it's relevant into where we're at today. My wife and I, Kelly, have 3 daughters, 16, 11, and 8. And our 11-year-old is named Lindsay, and she's most like her dad. And she's the one that her mom has the most trouble with in getting along, which I don't really understand how the one kid your spouse is most like you struggle in getting along with, Tony. That doesn't make sense to me, but at the age of 8, Lindsay thought her grandpa was really cool. And her grandpa is a country butcher. He's been a farmer his whole life, but he's just an amazing man, 72 years old, and with a pair of knives and 1,700-pound steer, he can turn that steer into 2 swinging sides and have it in the back of a pickup in a cooler or hanging from a tractor end loader in no time whatsoever. Well, my middle daughter early in life decided that that's really cool, and she likes to be there when Grandpa's butchering any animal. And so the other day, this was 3 years ago actually, we have some sows. We have 100 beef cows, we've got 40 sows, we've got 35 horses, and about 70 meat goats. Well, I had this one gilt that I knew was open. So I had told my father-in-law, Eldon, I said, Eldon, I'm going to be away, but if you get a chance to butcher that gilt, we'll just turn her into sausage because I know she's open, she's not bred, she's not going to be any good to me as a breeding female. So Lindsay's 8 years old, she's right there. Grandpa's butchering the gilt. She's there. What's that, Grandpa? Well, that's a large intestine, honey. What's that, Grandpa? That's a stomach. What's that, Grandpa? Well, that's the heart. What's that, Grandpa? Well, those are pigs that your dad didn't think was in there. So what's the natural question that any 8-year-old farm kid asks is, well, Grandpa, can I take these to school for show and tell? So we put these, their pigs are maybe half term. We put them in a pickle jar and put some water on them. She takes them to school. She comes home. And by the way, we live in a very rural area. There's 3,000 people in our county. There's 120 kids K through 12 in the whole school. So it's not like a big urban school. But anyway, she comes home from school that Monday night, and I happened to be there. And I said, well, Lindsay, how did show and tell go today? Well, Dad, Mrs. Taylor and I, we got to talking, and we just decided those other kids weren't ready for something like this. So Mrs. Taylor, who's been teaching second grade for 28 years, decided that this is more than I want to deal with. So anyway, last fall, we're castrating bull calves at our house, and most people castrate bull calves in the spring. We calve in March and April. We would have brandings, old-fashioned brandings, and castrate bull calves in May. We castrate bull calves at weaning time because you simply cannot have a good mountain oyster feed with testicles this big. We like big kahunas for mountain oyster feed, and we have big festivals at our place in the fall about school time. Anyway, here's Lindsay now. She's 11. And I'm castrated. I'm the one that cuts the tip of the sack off, and my father-in-law holds the tail. Lindsay says, well, Dad, what can I do to help? The only thing I could think of is I take the testicle and I hand it to her, and she puts it in the bucket. About halfway through this job the other day, she said, Dad, can I take these to school for show and tell? You bet, Lindsay. So we put some testicles in the freezer bag. She goes off to school. Happened to be parent-teacher conference that night. I went to the parent-teacher conference, and I said, well, Mr. Habe, how did show and tell go today? And he said, well, it was really interesting. Lindsay came up to me, and she showed me what it is that she wanted to do. And I said, well, this sounds like a good idea. So she goes in front of the class, and she's going through this really well. He said she's doing tremendous, and then something happened about halfway through. She got real red in the face, and she said, and to be honest, I didn't want to do this, but my dad made me. Which wasn't true at all, but, for me, as a father of 3 daughters, I've learned that I always thought as a 6th generation farmer, rancher, I don't get hung up on that, but I've always had a passion for livestock, not tilling the land, that it was animals and food production that truly moved me. And the older that I get and the older that my 3 daughters get, I learned that it's actually the opportunity to use the greatest classroom in life, and with things that live and things that die. And that's really what drives me every day. And so to kind of finish that Lindsay story, we were just a couple weeks ago, I was about ready to leave for a 3 or 4 day trip, and I had the whole family around the supper table in the evening. My wife Kelly's on the end, Libby, my 16-year-old's on one side of the table, and Lindsay's over here. And I've already told her she's just like her dad, so she started whining about something, driving everybody nuts. And I've got my 8-year-old sitting on my lap. And so I just leaned up and I whispered in Landry's ear. I said, Landry, tell Lindsay to grow a pair. So without hesitation, my 8-year-old turns to her sister and says, Lindsay, grow a pair. And she says, Dad, how would she grow a pair? Because you see, Landry loves eating pears. But Lindsay, who's pretty street smart, figures out that Dad has put his little sister up to something. And she says, Dad, what do you really mean? You're not talking about fruit, are you? What are you trying to get over on me? Meanwhile, Kelly's at the end of the table saying, yeah, Dad, how are you going to get out of this one? And then my 11-year-old makes the statement that has the purpose of this whole story about testicles and festivals. My 11-year-old turns to me and she says, Dad, either you tell me I'm going to Google it. So she trots over to her mom's computer, she sits down, she types in, what does it mean to grow a pear? P-E-A-R. Whew, got out of that one. Except, what does Google do if they think you screw up? We think you meant to say grow a pear, P-A-I-R, which means to grow a set of testicles and not be a wussy. And the moral of that story is that no matter what business you're in today, whether it be, quite frankly, education, food production, insurance, or a member of parliament, where do all citizens of the world turn if they have a question? Google it. And in the world of agriculture, when people Google what's happening in modern farms and they type in a couple of key buzzwords like factory farm or hormones or whatever the case may be, they find images like we just staged right here that may or may not be accurate into today's modern food production systems. I would like for you just to volunteer. Tell me what your definition of agriculture is. Somebody over here in left field. Agriculture is?
Food production.
Food production, okay. Agriculture is?
Sustainability.
Perfect. Agriculture is?
Land productivity.
Say that again, Pete.
Land productivity.
Land productivity. Agriculture is?
Future.
Say that? What?
The future.
Future, absolutely. Agriculture is? I'm going to go way back in North Field, right over, that's south, I think, but anyway. Come on. Livelihood, I like that. Agriculture is?
Feeding the world.
Feeding the world. You cheat on other people in all of your classrooms. Agriculture is? You've had like a whole room to think about this. Agriculture is?
Something I enjoy.
All of those things, minus a copycat, are what agriculture is. But think about this. Think about how different all of your answers are, and you're in an agricultural college. Now let's go to Melbourne. Let's go to Sydney, and let's just walk the streets and ask people the same thing. You know, it's continual that I sit on airplanes talking to people about what it is that I do, because apparently I don't look like everybody else on the plane, and it's intriguing to somebody sitting next to me, and they say, well, what do you do? And they think I'm off of some Hollywood movie set. In fact, somebody this week in Melbourne said, are you here for a new John Wayne movie? Which I was actually impressed she knew who John Wayne was, which was a good thing. But anyway, agriculture is the conversion of natural resources, I like to say the God-given natural resources, into the essentials of life. Food, fiber, pharmaceuticals, and fuel. Agriculture does not produce widgets that people buy if they have a little extra disposable income at the end of the year. Agriculture sustains life. And without agriculture, life ceased to exist. And that, I think, is what the main reason that I drive or fly all around the world, is to bring that connection, food producers to food consumers, and understand everything that you just brought out is indeed what agriculture is about. And I'm going to use some numbers. I apologize for this because I should have the numbers. I know that you're roughly, we have 23 million people. Do you know how many farmers there are in Australia out of the 23 million? 130,000 farming families, so that's what, half of 1%? Is my math okay? Is there a math teacher here? He's running the video camera. Yeah, that's only fitting. A half of 1%. So what does that really mean? That 99.5% really only know about agriculture, what they get from Google, unless Grandpa still has a station or a farm or whatever the case may be. And then we have, who is my sustainability guy over here? Stand up. What is sustainable agriculture? What's your name? Lawrence. What is sustainable agriculture? to continuously to be able to do what you're doing with the results you've got. Resources you've got. Okay? Is that what the typical Sydney consumer would define agriculture as? Sustainable agriculture? What would they say? Sit down, Lawrence. Somebody help Lawrence. What would they say? You started the ball rolling good, Lawrence. So what would just a typical Sydney consumer say that sustainable agriculture was? You look perfect. Stand up, young lady. What's your name?
Gab.
Gab?
Yep.
Is that your name or your actions? You like the Gab? So the typical Sydney consumer would say sustainable agriculture is what?
Giving them food.
No, Gab. That's not what they would say. If I go into Kohl's and I look, let's just talk about eggs, okay? Because Kohl's likes to lie to people about eggs. They have 14 different brands of eggs with every little story you can imagine on that label, right? So they're defining what sustainability is?
They're looking for the free range one.
Exactly. Why? Why do they perceive free range to be sustainable?
Because they like the idea of it, because the chicks are out in the open and that sort of idea.
Thank you, Gab. Perfect. They love the idea that we would call them chickens, you call them chokes, are out just grazing and experiencing the day. Okay? In Kohl's, right here in Geelong, there is a half dozen of eggs, I don't know the brand, doesn't matter, that cost $4.80 for a half dozen. And on that label, that's $9.60 a dozen, in case your math teacher's not real good. And on that label, it says free range, just like Gab said. It said no animal byproducts fed to these chokes. I mean, everything that you can put in terms of emotion is on that label. I don't know why, but I happened to open that particular package because I wanted $9.60 a dozen. I thought maybe they're made out of gold. And then how would you crack an egg that's made out of gold? Well, if it costs $9.60 a dozen, it is made out of gold. Anyway, I'm going to make an omelet. Doesn't make much sense. But anyway, I opened that package, and guess what's inside that package this week? I should have brought that little thing with me, but pretty much what it said was, due to high temperatures in the area in the past couple of weeks, our veterinarians have decided that our chickens would be better off and minimize their stress if we fed them some animal proteins, and we've had a predator problem recently, so at night we're letting the chickens go into the barn. We just wanted you to know. You know you're in trouble. I'm in trouble. I keep knocking things around. All right, young lady, stand up. What is your name? Claire. Why is that humorous? Are you a choke? Are you a choke enthusiast? No. Why were you humored? Oh, I doubt they're lying. I think that that's a true story. But what would the... In which case? With the little note inside? Okay. Anybody want to help Claire? Yes, what's your name?
Madison.
Stand up, Madison.
It's been,
Gentlemen, please take note the women are putting you to shame right now.
it's just a story for the public. They would rather believe that the chooks are happy they've had a vet come out and they're looking after their best interests, free them in at night, keep them safe, whereas they're probably not actually going outside at all. It helps keep them at peace of mind. But they're thinking, I'm buying free-range eggs, I'm doing my bit to keep chooks safe.
Right. Yep, I agree. 100%. But here's the question. Why are people willing to spend $9.60 a dozen for those eggs before all of this story inside the carton takes place? Because they perceive that the chicken would rather be outside in the open. And you're exactly spot on right. If those chickens had a choice, where do they go? They go to where they have the least amount of stress, because everything that we do in animal agriculture is about minimizing stress. And I would like somebody to stand up, just volunteer, stand up and there's only 37 women in here, and the rest of you are guys, and at this point, the women are out shining you fellas. But somebody stand up and tell me what the definition of animal husbandry or animal welfare is. Animal welfare is. Come on, testosterone-driven gentlemen. Okay, I'll pick. Yes, sir, what's your name? Jeremy, go. I love that. Meeting the needs of an animal and having it in a non-stress environment. That is what animal husbandry is to minimize the stress of an animal. We got into accidentally a tremendous conversation because about minimizing stress. And what's the number one failure if an animal is stressed? If an animal is stressed, what's the first thing that shuts down? What kind of production? What? Weight gain. Okay. Reproduction fails. And why does reproduction fail if an animal is stressed? Yes, sir? Self-preservation. What's your name? Reynolds. Boy, the guys are on a roll now, girls. So, self-preservation, because it's a natural instinct that happens to the animal, and quite frankly, happens to plants and happens to humans. That if there's some stress in the environment, it's a means of self-preservation to pull back on reproduction so that the production does not outpace what the habitat will support. So we have dairy cows today giving more or less milk than they did 50 years ago. More. We have pigs converting feed more efficiently and generating in places up to 33 pigs per sow per year. Are pigs stressed if they can produce and reproduce like that? Absolutely not. In the United States, I just got these numbers this week, so I've got to brag about them, and Australia would not be much different. We now have the record low number of beef breeding animals that we've had since 1951. We've had drought similar to what you've experienced in terms of extended drought, and the number of beef animals in the United States is now at a record low since 1951, and we produced 3 times more total beef in 2013 with less than half the animals that we had in 1951 because we minimize stress on the animal. And to me, this is really important as we continue to go forward, because what you've had happen here in Australia is you have people who theorize that the chickens love being out in the open, that the sows do not want to be in gestation stalls. They theorize all of these other things, but they never are there. They're never doing it hands-on. They sit around on advisory committees and they talk about what theories or what they think is best. And then they impose these artificial hurdles on you. And you have how many people in Australia? 23 million. And what are the 2 industries that you have that can contribute to improving human lives around the world? What? Agriculture and medicine? That's not where I was going, but I'm not being critical of your medicine program, and we're not going to talk about health care programs. But I would trade you Tony Abbott for Barack Obama if you're interested. I'd even throw in 2 pigs. We call them Bill and Hillary. Anyway, what was the question, Reynolds? All right. Well, the other thing, agriculture and mining. The 2 resources that you have that the world needs are food production and energy, mining. And in 2012, Australia, for the first time in the history of your country, became a net food importer. Did you know that? Why did that happen? Because you have too many people imposing hurdles that are far away from what you're learning in your economics programs and studying at school here. Far away from efficiently converting those resources into the essentials of life. Because you have too many people engaged in the process. And where we're at, and I sense the same exact thing happening here, is that every one of you want to go home and you want to be better in business management of agriculture and do the job. And really, many farmers are not real good at communicating and talk to other people. Consequently, in Canberra, you have Parliament doing things without the input of the people who provide the resources. And now you have a carbon tax in place, which puts you at a disadvantage. You have China just up the river who has more 1.3 billion people. They have no idea how to feed them. You have the resources and the ability to produce that food if you can keep the third-party interest at bay and allow you to do what it is that you have the knowledge and ability and what you're learning here in school to do, and that is efficiently take the resources, convert them into the essentials of life for mankind. But we cannot allow, I'm coming back to, where was I, with Lawrence, right? Sustainability needs to be defined by us. Not by Walmart, not by Kohl's, not by McDonald's. It needs to be defined by the people. How can you have families that have been taking care of the land? I was in Bendigo a year and a half ago, and I went out to a station where Mark Ritchie has got 20,000, third generation sheep producer producing wool. Somebody's going to come and tell Mark Ritchie how to be sustainable? His family's been doing it for 100 years because we've allowed other people in the food chain to define sustainability. And this will be at odds. Who's the economics teacher at the school, Simon? Is he the one hiding back there, Tony? This will be at odds with what you're learning in economics. But I'm going to share a little story with a guy named Lee Cockrell. Lee Cockrell spent 22 years working for Walt Disney, and his job was Vice President of Operations. And Vice President of Operations means that all the Walt Disney properties, people who worked there all around the world worked for him. 40,000 people worked under Lee Cockrell at Walt Disney. And I know I had this conversation with him, because we were speaking together on a panel at the International Poultry Expo in Atlanta, Georgia. It's only fitting that a guy named Cockrell would be speaking at a poultry convention. A guy named Loos, so I guess would be qualified for the free range convention, but that's another story. But anyway, Lee Cockrell knew nothing about agriculture, but he made a statement that was huge. He said, at Walt Disney, we never tried to please the customer first. We developed leaders first. That hit me like a bullet between the eyes. Because if we get somebody who says, I want my chickens, I want my eggs to come from chickens that were facing north, had that egg at 5 minutes after 12, with a 22 degrees Celsius day, and a 12-mile-an-hour wind from the southwest. What do? We've been taught in agriculture, well, that's what the consumer wants. We're going to figure out how to produce it. That's wrong. Because we know how to minimize the stress better than somebody who's designing sustainability indexes that's never been involved. So what we need, like Lee Cockrell explained to his 40,000 employees every day, is that we need to create leaders that know how to have the most enjoyable experience for the soccer mom and little Johnny and little Susie every time that they come. Because if they were there with millions of people that come through the Disney properties every year, and they listened to everybody who had an opinion on how they should create a better experience for them, what would they be doing? They'd constantly be reacting, and they'd never have a plan, and the whole thing would be a mess. And to me, that's where we're at in the global food business. We need leaders to step up to the plate and say, the farmer is the expert in taking care of the land, in minimizing the stress for the animals. And we do that more efficiently because that's really what it's about. In the United States in 1900, and your numbers are exactly the same. In 1900, it required 5 acres of land to produce enough food to feed a person for 1 year. Anybody know how many acres it took in 2013 to feed one person for a year? What? Half an acre. We've moved it from 5 acres to a half an acre. That's why you're here. You're learning the business aspects of how to produce more with less. And we have in the United States a tremendous land grant system which has allowed us to conduct research and find ways to be more efficient and more productive, minimizing stress for plants and animals. And instead, what we have now, animal agriculture has kind of been at the blunt of all of this. And now it's crop production's turn. Does anybody here actually raise maize or corn? I know it's not. You do? So do you harvest it as a corn crop or as a chopped product for feeding livestock?
Yeah, chopped product.
Chalk product. But you know how we have these corn heads? Have you seen the corn head where we got these fingers on a combine and we got these little roller dealy bobs on there? Well, in animal agriculture, we have really put a tremendous amount of time and effort into how we harvest the animal. And by the way, I use the word harvest because I think that slaughter is not the proper term, not because it's politically correct or sounds better, but to me, harvest is a word that shows the degree of respect that we have for taking the life of another living thing. And agriculture is about creating life, creating death, and that death improving other living things. That's what agriculture is really about. And what I'd like to say is our great challenge is that we have so many people that don't understand that cycle of life. And the fact that everything does live, everything does die, and death with a purpose gives full meaning to life. So what we do in agriculture is we actually manage the life, create the death to improve another living thing. And we got to grab a hold of this and get back to it. And in animal agriculture, as I said, we render that animal unconscious immediately and we begin the process. And that's the respect that we morally have as an obligation to begin this process with respect. We do not want, whether it be in a euthanasia scenario, because I know what's going on with the bobcalves and the dairies and what they've been worth, and some of them are being euthanized. And there's nothing wrong with euthanization as long as it's done immediate and render the animal unconscious immediately. That's what we owe to the animal. But in crop production, it's just all starting to come to a head. Back to my combine. United States corn farmer, it's the worst addiction you've ever seen in your life. The United States farmer loves raising corn. It's just crazy. We raised 14 billion bushels of corn last year. All right? But we have these combine heads that have these little roller dealy bobs on there. And we go through the combine or through the cornfield and we don't actually kill the mother. We just mangle the mother down to the ground. Just mangle it down there. We rip the baby away from the mother. We put the baby up in the hopper of the combine. We go through the field. The baby's hollering for the mother. The mother's laying on the ground hollering for the baby, and the farmer doesn't care at all. And we chuckle at that. But in the United States, there are actually 3 universities studying whether or not plants feel pain. And at the University of Michigan, they have determined, which is not a land-grant university, by the way, at the University of Michigan, they have determined that not only do these plants feel pain, they also have cognitive abilities. And the plant actually knows whether it's related to the neighboring plant or not. And I've seen thistles here this week in my travels out at Warrnambool and different places. You've got thistles just like we do. Think about it in your fields if you've got a pasture. Have you ever had a place that you have one thistle? Hell no, it's like a family reunion over here. Little did we know, they're sending out text messages and emails saying, come on over here, we killed the grass. We're spending taxpayer money studying whether or not plants feel pain. That only happens in nations where the essentials of life come so easily that they're taken for granted. And that ultimately is the challenge that we have. When I started doing what I'm doing today, I said it was because the consumer, the global consumer, did not know enough about where their food comes from. And today I tell you that they know too much about where their food comes from. The problem is too much of what they know isn't so. And the ultimate goal that I have, and that I hope that you share at some level, is just to make sure that the consumers who walk into Kohl's or whatever place it might be make those food purchase decisions based upon the facts rather than the marketing gimmick, the rhetoric, or what somebody found on a Google search. Because it's about the essentials of life. I don't want to continue. I promise. I told you I wasn't going to lecture, right? And I kind of lapsed into that. So I would love, how long do we have, just so I know where we're at?
Another 5 minutes if you like, and then Yasmin will run some questions. Over to you, Trent.
Well, I was going to ask if there were any questions now.
Yasmin will fix that.
I'll take questions now, and then we'll. Are you? You asking me the questions?
Yeah, what questions have you got? No. I'm not going to put you on the spot like Trent did. I don't want to start pulling you up. So you stand up, you stand up. So if we've got any questions.
Yeah, Trent, why do you think that agriculture, not just in Australia but globally, has failed in its leadership to address the issues that you've spoken about in terms of managing perceptions, managing the way other stakeholders, customers, government, society views agriculture? We can complain about other people having these ideas. We also have an onus of responsibility to manage that process. Why is it that agriculture has failed, unlike maybe some other industries, to really grasp that issue?
Look around this room. Go to any agricultural meeting in the United States and you have predominantly white European influenced individuals. I'm sixth generation Loos in the United States from Germany. My grandfather passed away in 2006 at the age of 88. So he witnessed me for a few years, 6 years, doing what I'm doing today. And weeks before he passed away, he said, "Trent, I don't understand why you just don't stay hard and stay home and work hard and everything else will take care of itself." And that's been the thought process of farm families, that you just work hard, you take care of yourself, you're producing something that people need, the rest will take care of itself. That's not the world that we live in today. Today we live in a world where the squeaky wheel gets the grease. Look at what's happened in Australia. We have liberals, and within that liberal party we have a faction that you would consider Greens. Look at what the Greens are doing politically in Australia. Are they large in number? Are there a lot of Greens in Australia? Absolutely not. But they never shut up. And people listen to them. So the core of what we're talking about here is that we've been working hard, doing what we know is important, but we haven't been telling anybody. And it's interesting that yesterday I had the great opportunity to speak at the Australian Dairy Conference right here in town, and we had 370 dairymen. And the 50-plus-year-old guys, and I gave some version of what I'm sharing with you today, but the moral of the story was that we have to be more involved, and we have to be more like the Greens and be vocal and let people know what we think is important. And the guys who are 50 years old and older all have the same approach. That's good speech, Trent. You're right. Somebody needs to do that. You need to do that. But the 40s and under all say, we're going to make that happen. We've been quiet too long. And the reason that I am most excited to be with you here today is that I find all across this country the people who are fed up with status quo, the people who want to not only do a better job producing food, but engage in the process, let people know, let their neighbors know how important agriculture and food production is to the future, is you and your demographics. And I just see it. I see the inspiration to just somebody to give you permission to go out every week. Somebody calls or emails me and says, "Trent, I'm a junior at Oklahoma State University and I want to be an advocate for agriculture. Where can I go get that training to really be a good speaker?" You know who the best advocates are? Not the best speakers. The best advocates are the best listeners. Because when you're listening to what it is that the consumers are voicing as their concerns, you then share and pull on your own personal experiences in food production, and you share them because you're listening to what it is that they're really concerned about. It's noise to talk about something that nobody else is in tune to what you have to share. But if you're a good listener and you zero in, my favorite people to engage are those that I have no chance in the world to convert to anything. If I see a PETA person, I go engage with them. Okay, rugby, I understand the heritage of rugby. Is there a single rugby team in Australia that's ever won without practicing? No. So if you got a PETA person that you're never going to convince, this is like free practice for the next rugby match, all right? You can go work on things, but you'll hear yourself. And until you reach the point that you question yourself why it is you believe what you believe, and then you answer that question to yourself, you won't be as good an advocate as you could be. because you can do things your whole life because, well, that's the way Grandpa did them, that's the way Dad's doing them, and that's the way I'm doing them. But until you figure out that, oh, I put an estrogen-based hormone in a steer's ear, why do I do that? I do that because it improves the overall efficiency of food production. It allows me to produce more with less. It's one of the contributing factors so that in the United States, we produce 3 times as much beef as we did in 1951 with the same number of cows. So you question you put yourself in confrontation you confront without being confrontational. Okay? Anytime you confront somebody and lose your cool, your face gets red, you say something stupid, you lose. But if you confront without being confrontational, you can learn, you can listen, and you can figure out what it is that's moving people. 2 more questions like that, and we'll be here till noon. Was that fair?
No. Very good. Any more? Another question here?
Great.
We've got 2 here. You happy to stand up and just ask it?
How do you do it without just adding to the noise in the industry? Like, there's been a growth in agricultural advocacy, but a lot of it's just repeating, and it's just another thing that comes up on Google that's just adding to the noise that confuses the consumer.
I think that's a great question because there's a lot of people doing blogs, a lot of people sharing information. As long as you're sharing your personal information, I'm not worried about the confusing part. You brought up confusing the consumer because they're getting so many different views. But the better question in my mind is, how do you become not part of the noise so that it resonates? I think that we're in a terrible time in that we believe that social media is the silver bullet for the disconnect that we all are concerned about. Social media is a tool, but quite frankly, your interactions with people one-on-one is going to resonate, and that will eliminate the noise for people. And as you meet them, you then send them to your blog or whatever you might be doing as a resource to get factual information. But it's the personal one-on-one interaction. Globally, we all think that there's going to be one recipe, one spokesperson that can just fix all of this. That's not going to happen. There's no silver bullet. One person, one day at a time, and then finding a way to have a personal connection and driving people to those resources where they can get factual information when they need it, when they want it, is the answer. One-on-one interactions will never be replaced as the best way to resonate a message.
I was just going to ask.
Oh, she has to stand up.
You've got to stand up.
I was just going to ask, if you're saying how much it's changed between when you first started to now, where do you see it changing in the future with you doing this kind of talks with young people like us?
Are you asking me if I'm any good or if I'm just spinning my wheels?
No, I mean, like, what do you want to get out of coming and doing these talks? Like, I know you want to, like you were saying, that consumers didn't know enough about it, and now you're saying that they know too much. Where do you see it in, like, the next couple of years? Like, do you see it changing that way?
Oh, I see it changing, not because of what I'm doing, but because of what you're going to do. I'm serious in that I see your generation fed up with what's been happening and seeking the answers to find a way to create solutions. The reason I have you contribute is I'm stealing from every one of you that shares something. And it goes into what formulates my advocacy as I travel the country, travel the globe actually. And what I want to get out of it is that all of you do at least one thing different tomorrow than you did yesterday. And I'm not telling I'm sharing my views and what I think is important, and I'm not telling any of you to take those at face value. I'm trying to intrigue you enough that you'll go research something maybe in a way that you never thought about it before. And that you go formulate your own opinions based upon what some cowboy from Nebraska forced you to think about things in a different way. And I wanted to go research that and see what is the real deal with these chokes and their stress. You know what I mean? That's what I want to get, is I want you to do something different tomorrow than you did yesterday.
Thank you. Well, I think on that note, we've had some good questions, and on that last note by Trent, I think we might close his talk, unless there is any other burning questions, but there might be a few minutes just to have a quick chat with him once we finish.
I'm going to share a story in closing.
Oh, you do? Okay, so we've got a little story at the end. But I'd like us to put our hands together, and on behalf of the CSRA, the staff and the students, I'd like to thank you very much for that presentation.
Thank you.
Wow, there's your standing ovation. You should have had that on tape. Look, Trent's going to end it now with a little story, apparently, so let's just sit back and listen to what he has to say.
It's just proof that I've always said you get what you expect. Thank you. Anyway, I understand the intent. Final thing that I want to share is that we were talking earlier, in the United States we have this youth organization. It's a national FFA. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but right now we've got about 600,000 members nationwide. And in all of our rural communities, kids in high school take agricultural classes, can be a part of this national youth organization called FFA, which originally was Future Farmers of America, and it's changed. But in our rural areas, we've been restricted on funding, and many administrators believe that these extracurricular activities, which I happen to believe are the greatest learning opportunities you have, are too expensive, and we can no longer afford them. And in the state of Michigan, which is one of the Great Lakes states, there's a small rural farming community of 2,000 people that in 2003, the school administration decided they could no longer afford agricultural education or the FFA in this school. Well, there's 80 kids in this school in FFA, and the students said, well, that's not right. Harbor Beach, Michigan is agriculture, and if we don't have an agricultural program, it's just not right. We need to do something to generate public sentiment. Well, principal of the school found that there was a movement that year at graduation, the last Saturday in May, to generate some public sentiment to save the FFA. So he calls a school assembly, he brings everybody into the gymnasium 3 days before graduation, and he says, if any of you attempt to do anything at graduation to generate public sentiment to save any group, you will not receive your diploma nor graduate from this school. Well, a young man by the name of Daniel Nowinski happened to be the valedictorian of that class. And he tells me today, when I talked to him, that when he went to the podium to give his valedictorian speech, he really didn't know what he was going to say. But what he said, I will never forget. He said, I've come here today not knowing what the right words were, and I was sitting out there thinking about how we have to live with every decision that we make for the rest of our life. But he said it also just occurred to me that we have to live with every decision that we don't make for the rest of our life. And Daniel Nowinski reached into his pocket and he pulled out the FFA sash and he put it on in front of his community, in front of his peers, and in front of that administration. The standing ovation lasted in excess of 5 minutes. I'm told by people who were in attendance that there was not a single dry eye in the auditorium as they walked out. When people came that day, they had no idea any of this was taking place. And the best part of the story is, last year on March 21st, I was asked to come and speak at their FFA chapter banquet 10 years to the day after that one young man, 18 years old, made the decision that if it is to be, it's up to me. And thanks to his efforts, students still have the opportunity to take agriculture education and be a part of the National FFA in Harbor Beach, Michigan. Thank you for your kind words, your tremendous dialogue, and I'm pretty easy to find on the social media world if you'd like to maintain communication from today on, which I hope happens. Thanks.